Have you ever stopped to wonder if the brightest, most dazzling stars in the entertainment world might actually be closer to death's door than any of us could ever imagine? In today's video, you're going to discover the heartbreaking reality of 15 beloved celebrities who are battling medical conditions so severe and relentless that their lights could literally be extinguished at any given moment. Get ready to witness the other side of fame, the side that hurts, the side that stays hidden in the shadows, and the side that is undeniably painfully human. First on our list is Bruce Willis, diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia. Hollywood hailed him as the absolute perfect anti-hero, the tough guy, the unstoppable force, the sarcastic wit who seemed completely immortal on the silver screen. Bruce Willis didn't just star in an iconic action saga, he practically embodied an entire era of cinema. But then one day the fiction shattered. The camera stopped rolling and all that was left was a terrifying heavy silence, because Bruce started forgetting his lines. Then he began forgetting entire scenes and eventually he started to forget himself. The first warning sign was aphasia, a sudden shocking inability to speak coherently. For a man who mastered explosive scripts and delivered some of the most famous lines in history, it was like losing his superpower, but the truth lurking beneath was even darker. Back in 2022, doctors discovered that this wasn't just a simple speech disorder, it was frontotemporal dementia, a cruel, progressive brain disease that slowly destroys personality, emotions, language, and self-awareness. Since that diagnosis, Bruce has started to fade away. Day after day, his world gets smaller and smaller. His memories blur into nothingness, and the spark in his face dims. In the heartbreaking words of his wife, Emma Hemming, he likely no longer knows he is sick or even who he used to be. He doesn't recognize his own legend anymore, the man who once saved hostages, fought off terrorists, and walked through explosions. Today cannot even hold a simple conversation. The brain damage has been relentless, yet there is one thing this disease failed to destroy: the immense love that surrounds him. Emma, his ex-wife Demi Moore, and his daughters, they all hold him close in this growing darkness. They take turns being by his side so he never feels alone, ensuring that even if his memory betrays him, his heart can still remember that he is deeply, profoundly loved. Sadly, there is no cure, no magic treatment to save him. There is only time, which has become a silent, creeping enemy. His acting career is officially over. His days of glory are behind him, but his story, far from ending with the rolling credits, transforms into a living elegy. Bruce Willis, the eternal hero of cinema, is now fighting his absolute last battle. It is a battle not won with guns or epic catchphrases, but with the bravery to let yourself be cared for even when you no longer remember why you were great. Next, we have Michael J. Fox battling Parkinson's disease. To the eyes of the world, he was simply Marty McFly, young, charismatic, and completely invincible. But while millions of fans dreamed of traveling in the DeLorean into the future, he was already trapped in a silent countdown toward his own collapse. He was barely 29 years old with his career at its absolute peak, and his name engraved in gold, yet a slight twitch in. His hand was the omen of something that not even Hollywood's darkest screenwriters would have dared to imagine: Parkinson's. The diagnosis crashed down like a meteorite upon his life. The man who conquered time on screen was suddenly dragged into a cruel present filled with uncertainty, fear, and rage. For years he hid it, terrified of losing roles, contracts, and his own identity. After all, who would want to hire a hero who can't stop shaking? How do you remain an icon when your own body betrays you with every single movement? But then something unexpected happened. Instead of hiding, Michael decided to turn his tragedy into a trench for battle. In 1998, he broke his silence, and just 2 years later, he founded the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which today stands as the largest organization in the world dedicated to Parkinson's research. He has raised over $2 billion. He transformed into an unstoppable voice. The New York Times called him the most influential figure on the planet in the fight against Parkinson's. But the price was high. In 2020, complications forced him to finally say goodbye to acting. Cinema may have lost a star, but the world gained a warrior. Even though every day is a war against his own nervous system, Michael J. Fox keeps smiling and he keeps fighting because he understood something that many never will. True greatness isn't found in avoiding the tremor, but in facing it with your head held high. Before we move on, take a breath. Pour yourself a cup of coffee or tea, because what you are about to see will not leave you indifferent. Celine Dion's stiff person syndrome. For decades, her voice broke boundaries, but in December 2022, the world learned the truth. The legendary singer Celine Dion announced that she was stepping away from the stage indefinitely, and it wasn't on a whim or due to simple exhaustion. It was for something far crueler and much more inexplicable: stiff person syndrome. It sounds strange, doesn't it? It is rare, but it is also absolutely devastating. This neurological disorder essentially turns the human body into a living, breathing cage. It triggers violent, unpredictable muscle spasms, extreme rigidity, and a progressive loss of motor control that leaves you helpless. For Celine, this diagnosis meant the silence of her melody. Every single attempt to sing turned into an agonizing physical battle. Simple things like walking, getting up, or even just standing on her own feet became titanic challenges. She revealed this through tears in an Instagram video that completely paralyzed her fan base. Her body, once so sculptural and commanding on stage, began to fail her in a heartbreaking, systematic way. Her muscles would stiffen and lock up to the point where moving normally became literally impossible. Doctors now fear she might be developing a more aggressive version of the syndrome, known as the plus variant, which attacks the brainstem and can devastate vision balance and speech. Yet even in the midst of this brutal physical deterioration, her fighting spirit remains completely intact. Her dedicated team of therapists is fighting a war against the clock, trying treatments that in most cases barely manage to slow the disease's relentless advance. But she refuses to surrender. She made a solemn promise if her body grants her even a brief truce, she will return to the stage for one final residency in Las Vegas. It is a farewell that promises to be historic because what many people don't fully grasp is that Celine Dion isn't just fighting for her career. She isn't just losing her iconic voice, she is losing her body, her personal freedom, and her very way of existing in the world. And still she wakes up every single day holding on to the fragile hope that the music hasn't finished writing its final note just yet. Then there is Christina Applegate and her battle with multiple sclerosis. For decades, her face was synonymous with comedy, youth, and rebellion. We knew her as Kelly Bundy in Married with Children. America's explosive daughter was giggly, provocative, and untamable, but behind the screen, a silent shadow was looming over her. In 2021, Christina Applegate announced to the world that she was suffering from multiple sclerosis. From that precise moment, her life transformed into a constant, grueling war against her own biology. It all started with vague, confusing signals, clumsiness while walking, an unusual level of fatigue, and persistent aches that wouldn't go away. What looked like stress or burnout was actually an autoimmune neurodegenerative disease attacking her myelin, the protective barrier that lets the brain talk to the body. Without that connection, every single movement becomes uncertain and disconnected. Every step is a risk. Christina had to face this nightmare right in the middle of filming the final season of Dead to Me. While the audience was laughing at her sharp, acidic dialogue, she was quietly weeping behind the scenes, needing physical support just to stay standing. The pain in her legs was unbearable. Sleep became a nightmare, and at times her eyes hurt so badly she feared they might actually pop out of their sockets. Her body, once a reliable instrument of talent and beauty, began to tremble, collapse, and fail her in real time. But that wasn't all. She suffered 30 brain lesions caused by the disease, triggering sudden jolts that felt like mini seizures. At any given moment, her body could simply disconnect from her willpower without warning. The worst part is the uncertainty. There is absolutely no way to know which function she might lose tomorrow. Her vision, her speech, her mobility, everything is on the line, and yet Christina did not break. As a survivor of breast cancer, she already knows the face of fear, but she also knows exactly how to fight back. With a mix of rage, dignity, and dark humor, she reinvented herself as a powerful voice for everyone suffering from invisible illnesses. She appeared at awards shows with a cane and a defiant expression as if to say, "Yeah, I'm broken, but I am still standing right here." Christina Applegate may not be acting anymore in the traditional sense. Her career might be on indefinite pause, but her presence, her bravery, and the way she stares down a treacherous disease have made her far more than just an actress. She is a symbol of resistance. Now let's talk about Charlie Sheen and HIV. At his absolute peak, Charlie Sheen was the king of television, pulling in a staggering $1.8 million per episode. On 2.5 Men, his life was an explosive cocktail of massive fame, wild excesses, and scandalous headlines. Drugs, parties, public feuds, he seemed indestructible until 2015 when he dropped a bomb that shook the entertainment world to its core. He was HIV positive, and he had been carrying that secret in silence for 4 long years. The news was a media earthquake not just because of the confession itself, but because of the way he delivered it. Charlie didn't apologize, he didn't cry, and he didn't beg for pity. He sat in front of the cameras and told the truth without sugarcoating it with that signature mix of arrogance and vulnerability. But what the public didn't know was the personal hell he had been living through, blackmail threats and the constant paranoia that someone would sell his secret. The media crucified him. Some called him irresponsible, others called him selfish. But then the unthinkable happened. The Charlie Sheen effect took hold. Google searches about HIV absolutely skyrocketed, jumping by a massive 2,000%, while medical testing centers saw a huge surge in people coming in all around the world. It wasn't just doctor visits. Sales of at-home detection kits shot up by 95% as people took matters into their own hands. Researchers and epidemiologists ended up confirming something that seemed totally unthinkable at the time. Charlie Sheen, arguably the most troubled and chaotic actor of his entire generation, had actually achieved more for HIV prevention than countless official government campaigns ever did. Right in the middle of all that chaos and noise, he transformed into a symbol, maybe an uncomfortable one, sure, but undeniably a powerful one. His fall from grace was absolutely brutal to watch, yes, but opening up with his testimony most likely saved thousands upon thousands of real lives. Today, Charlie is living his life under strict antiretroviral treatment, carefully keeping his viral load under control day by day. He isn't the massive superstar dominating the silver screen anymore, but he is a changed man marked forever by the scandals, yet also touched by a sense of redemption. As he said in his own words, "My blood isn't news anymore, but my story certainly is." Now let's talk about Selma Blair and her battle with multiple sclerosis. To the casual observer, Selma Blair always seemed like a supporting actress, someone on the sidelines, but she always possessed the burning soul of a true protagonist. She absolutely shined in movies like Legally Blonde and Hellboy, captivating us with that sweet face and a kind of silent, brooding intensity that very few others could ever match. But what the world didn't see was that behind the scenes, away from the cameras, her body was literally breaking down piece by piece. In 2018, Blair revealed she was suffering from multiple sclerosis, and from that moment on, her life stopped being a Hollywood comedy script and turned into a real-time drama of pure survival. The disease had actually shown its ugly face long before the official diagnosis she was suffering from: falls for no reason, blurry vision, and a fatigue so heavy it was paralyzing. But as heartbreakingly happens with so many women in the medical system, her symptoms were dismissed and ignored for years. It went on until one day she simply couldn't walk without a cane. She couldn't speak without a massive effort, and she couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. That's when she finally told the world everything. She felt that her body was shutting down right in front of her eyes, and nobody else seemed to even notice it happening. Multiple sclerosis is cruel. It essentially destroys the vital communication lines between the brain and the rest of the body. It causes intense stiffness, uncontrollable spasms, vision loss, tremors, and a constant gnawing fear of the unknown. For Selma, this meant losing control over her own tongue, her balance, and her energy. There were times she would lie paralyzed for hours, physically unable to lift herself off the floor. Every single morning felt like a game of Russian roulette. She'd wake up wondering, will I be able to talk today? Will I walk? Will I even breathe without help? But instead of hiding away in shame, Blair did the unthinkable. She showed up on the Oscars red carpet, gripping her cane, trembling visibly but smiling through it all. She completely broke the mold that night and instantly transformed into a powerful symbol of resilience. In 2021, she took an even bolder step. She underwent a stem cell transplant, a risky experimental treatment that promised to either stop the disease in its tracks or kill her in the process. She survived it, and a new woman was born from that struggle. Now, Selma uses her voice, even if it shakes sometimes, to fight for those who don't have a platform of their own. She is an activist, she is a devoted mother, she is chronically ill, and above all, she is a total warrior. She knows very well that her body could collapse at any moment, but she also knows something much more important. She knows that as long as she can hold onto that cane, she will keep walking forward, even if she has to walk over the ruins of her old life to do it. If this story touched your soul, go ahead and leave the number 1 in the comments. If it didn't, leave a 0. We really value your honesty. Now, Michael Douglas and his battle with throat cancer. Back in 2010, the entire world of cinema shook with the news. Michael Douglas, Hollywood icon, eternal seducer, Oscar winner, and heir to a legendary acting dynasty, revealed he was suffering from stage 4 squamous cell carcinoma in his throat. It was a cancer so aggressive and so voracious that doctors seriously doubted if he would survive even a single year. For the public, it was shocking news, but for him, it felt like a reckoning with his own past. Douglas had lived life on the edge. He was a heavy smoker, a drinker, and he devoured fame. For decades, he was literally the face of success and excess. But from one day to the next, everything changed. He started losing weight at an alarming rate, and that famous voice turned rough and raspy. Speaking hurt him. Eating was pure torture. On his worst days, he couldn't even swallow his own saliva without feeling like he was drowning inside his own body. The treatment was absolutely brutal, lethal combinations of chemotherapy and radiation that left him teetering on the edge of total physical collapse. He disappeared from public life for months while his immune system crumbled away and the radiation destroyed his salivary glands. There were often times when he couldn't even speak clearly at all. And for an actor whose main weapon was his voice, that silence was a special kind of torture. But Michael didn't hide. He decided to go public with every step of his battle, and he even took the blame on himself. He admitted, maybe my lifestyle helped cause this. It was raw, it was brave, and it was undeniably real. After 3 years of absolute hell, the doctors gave him news that seemed miraculous. He was finally cancer-free. It was a second chance, but it came with a warning. That type of cancer has a memory and it can come back at any moment. Since then, Douglas has lived his life with extreme caution. He avoids alcohol, tobacco, and all the excesses, but he hasn't stopped living. He returned to the movies even if the roles are a bit more measured now. His face still has that shine, but now it's marked with deep wrinkles that tell a completely different story. A painful story where the once irresistible leading man was forced to learn how to speak, how to eat, and truly, how to live all over again. And so Michael Douglas didn't just defeat the cancer, he defeated the man he used to be, reinventing himself into someone not only stronger, but profoundly more human. Cher and her battle with chronic fatigue syndrome. Cher has always been an absolute force of nature, a goddess of pop music, who reinvented herself time and time again, completely defying age, changing trends, and every single critic. Nobody shone quite like she did. But in the early 1990s, that brilliant light almost flickered out forever. Suddenly she started feeling exhausted, and I don't mean just tired, I mean utterly devastated. With no apparent reason at all, her body was just collapsing. At first, the doctors thought it was just stress, then maybe the flu. But the truth was something else entirely. She had contracted the Epstein-Barr virus, and with it came the dreaded chronic fatigue syndrome. Her immune system went into a complete nosedive. The fever just wouldn't break, and even the simple act of walking became pure torture. She was so incredibly weakened that she couldn't even keep herself standing up for more than just a few minutes at a time. The very woman who used to electrify entire stadiums with her voice and presence was now spending her days trapped in bed, begging for an ounce of energy that just never came. For 2 whole years, she completely disappeared from the entertainment world without any public explanation. Nobody had a clue what was really going on. Some people speculated it was depression. Others whispered about an overdose. But the actual truth was even more heartbreaking than the rumors. Cher couldn't sing, she couldn't act, and she couldn't live her life. A wrong diagnosis of bronchitis led her to the very brink of death due to untreated pneumonia. In her own words, she said she felt like she was literally disintegrating from the inside out. She traveled all the way to Germany to try an experimental treatment. It wasn't a total cure, but it gave her a truce, and with that tiny spark of relief, she rose from the ashes. She went on to record 7 more albums. She returned to the stage, and even today, at nearly 80 years old, she keeps performing, even though the syndrome tries to steal every drop of energy she has. She does it because she can, and she does it because she wants to. But the most shocking part of her story isn't just her recovery, it's the fact that she keeps fighting this battle every single day without anyone even noticing. Chronic fatigue syndrome doesn't leave visible scars and it doesn't make medical headlines, but it has the power to consume absolutely everything. And yet Cher refuses to give in because she is so much more than just a singer. She is more than a legend. She is the living proof that true talent can survive even when the body just wants to surrender. Jack Nicholson. Dementia. There was a time when Jack Nicholson wasn't just in Hollywood, he was Hollywood. With just a single raised eyebrow, he could provoke laughter, fear, or absolute chaos. From The Shining to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. His presence was magnetic, his talent was fierce, and his legend was unquestionable. But in 2010, something shifted. Without any warning, he disappeared from the screen. There was no goodbye, no tribute, only silence. And behind that silence lay a truth that many are afraid to even name: dementia. Sources close to him claim that by the end of the 2000s, Nicholson began to struggle with serious memory problems. At first, he was just forgetting lines, then he would get disoriented on set, until one day he simply stopped accepting scripts altogether. For someone so obsessed with perfection, the idea of acting without being at 100% was totally unacceptable, so he walked away without saying a word. The diagnosis was never officially confirmed. He never admitted it publicly himself. But the pieces fit together. The isolation, the total absence of appearances, and the impossibility of memorizing a script. And in the very few moments he was seen in public, maybe a Lakers game or a blurry photo, from a balcony, what stood out was that lost look in his eyes. His body was there, but his mind, maybe not so much. Since then, he has been living as a recluse in his mansion in Los Angeles. He doesn't give interviews, he doesn't go to award shows, and he doesn't answer calls. Some swear he has erased every connection with the industry that once adored him. Others believe that he simply chose to grow old far away from the flashing lights. But among his close friends, the suspicion is different, that the most vibrant man in American cinema is currently trapped in a labyrinth with no way out. And that is the most painful part, because Nicholson wasn't just any actor. He was a titan, a transgressor, and a total force of nature. His absence isn't just physical, it is emotional. Cinema lost so much more than just a star. It lost a voice, a controlled madness, and that constant sense of danger that made everything so much more interesting. Today, Jack Nicholson doesn't remember that he was Jack Nicholson, and that might just be the greatest tragedy ever written without a script. Tim Curry and his stroke. For decades, Tim Curry was a true master of disguise, capable of shifting from absolute horror to the most absurd humor imaginable. His presence was a unique mix of pure magnetism and mystery. He was the terrifying original Pennywise, the eccentric Dr. Frank N. Furter in The Rocky Horror Picture Show, and the mocking receptionist in Home Alone 2. But one day, without any announcement or a single goodbye, he disappeared, and hidden behind that disappearance was a total physical collapse. In 2012, Curry suffered a massive stroke that changed his life forever, leaving the right side of his body partially paralyzed. But truthfully, the most devastating part of it all wasn't even that. It was his voice, that iconic instrument that had made him unforgettable in theater cinema and voice acting, which suddenly became almost inaudible. He was struck by dysarthria, a neuromuscular speech disorder that left him trapped inside a body that could no longer express itself the way it used to. This actor, who once filled entire theaters with just his commanding presence, was now fighting a losing battle just to pronounce a single complete sentence. His public appearances became rare and sporadic, always seen in a wheelchair surrounded by assistants, and speaking with a frail tone that was barely recognizable. Often the fans who actually managed to speak with him would end up in tears, not out of pity, but because of the heartbreaking gap between the giant he once was and what remains today. Yet, even confined within this new limited body, Tim Curry absolutely refused to just fade away into the darkness. He still attends conventions, signs autographs for his supporters, and lets himself be seen lingering behind the scenes. He reemerged not just as an actor, but as a powerful symbol, living proof that physical collapse doesn't have to mean the destruction of one's dignity. The most tragic part, however, is that his mind remains completely intact. He understands every single word, every gesture, and every nuance of emotion. He is a genius held prisoner inside a body that betrayed him without a moment's warning, and that right there is the cruel final irony. The man who breathed life into cinema's most intense characters can now only speak with his eyes. Tim Curry will never return to the stage. His time basking under the spotlights may have ended, but his story is certainly far from over. Because sometimes the most powerful voice isn't the one you hear loud and clear, but the one that stubbornly resists the silence. If you've made it this far, thank you. Leave a number 2 in the comments below so we know you're still right here with us on this incredibly intimate journey. Next, we have Eric Clapton battling peripheral neuropathy. Eric Clapton wasn't just a musician. For many, he was a religion. But for over a decade now, that very body that turned him into a legend has started to fail him. It happened in silence without any grand spectacle or warning. First came the persistent lower back pain, then the electric shocks shooting down his legs, and finally a diagnosis that froze his world: peripheral neuropathy, a disease that turns your nerves into internal executioners. Every single step he took became an absolute torment. The vibrations in his feet and hands were constant, as if his body was screaming at him that something was terribly, terribly wrong. Back in 2013, when the diagnosis was officially confirmed, Clapton finally understood the magnitude of the blow. He could lose the ability to play the guitar forever. For any musician, that would be tragic, but for him, it would be apocalyptic. Since then, his life has turned into a daily battle against the pain. His tours had to be shortened and concerts were canceled one after another. Some days, he simply couldn't even get out of bed. Every note he played required brutal strength, and every chord became a bittersweet victory over his decaying body. And yet he kept on playing because he didn't know how to do anything else, because the music was the only thing keeping him alive. But Clapton knows the harsh truth. This condition is progressive. As it advances, he could suffer from muscle atrophy paralysis and severe respiratory difficulties. In the absolute worst-case scenario, it could lead to a silent and definitive multi-organ failure. He turned 81 this past May. He celebrated with a guitar in his hand, playing with less speed and more effort, sure, but still with all that soul. He does this despite the latent fear of not waking up one day with any mobility, and despite the constant pain that gnaws at his bones. Because Clapton has understood something truly devastating. His legend might be eternal, but his physical body definitely is not. And so night after night, Eric Clapton steps onto that stage as if it were the very last time he ever will. And when his fingers manage to move, when his soul pours through those strings, the whole world forgets that this man is dying little by little, and they only hear God himself playing the blues. Then there's Sam Neill fighting T-cell cancer. For millions of us, he will always be the doctor. Alan Grant with his hat in hand and that skeptical look taming dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. But in real life, the monster that attacked Sam Neill didn't have fangs or claws. Instead, it took a microscopic, silent, and lethal form. It was angioimmunoblastic T-cell lymphoma, one of the rarest and most aggressive cancers in existence. The news finally broke in 2023, but his battle had actually started long before that. During a promotional tour, he noticed a lump in his neck. It seemed like nothing alarming at first until the test results threw him into the abyss. The cancer wasn't just there, it was multiplying. His life, which had been so orderly until then, turned into an endless succession of hospitals, needles, cold rooms, and pure fear. The first treatments failed completely. His body just wouldn't respond. The cancer seemed to advance with a viciousness, almost as if it knew its prey was strong. In the midst of that despair, Sam found a way to cling to life writing. That is how his autobiography, Did I Ever Tell You This?, was born. It was written between grueling chemotherapy sessions. Every word served as a shield, and every page was a way to ensure he wouldn't disappear. The doctors then decided to try something radical, an experimental therapy with lifelong drugs. It wouldn't cure him, but it would keep him stable. Sam Neill is now living his life under constant medical surveillance, totally dependent on these monthly injections that frankly could stop working at any given moment. His entire existence hangs by a fragile chemical thread, and yet you won't see him crying about it playing the victim, or making a huge drama out of the situation. He has made it clear that he wants to spend these final years of his life purely enjoying himself rather than fighting a losing battle. He is fully aware that death could be waiting right around the corner, but he also understands something most people ignore, that time isn't measured in years but in moments lived with real purpose. Through it all, Sam Neill hasn't stopped working for a single second, and he certainly hasn't stopped smiling. But whenever he leans against a wall to rest or gazes out at the horizon, you can spot a kind of serene urgency in his expression. It is the look of a man who has already seen the absolute worst and has decided to pour his whole soul into living whatever time he has left. Then there is Kathy Bates battling cancer and lymphedema. For over 35 years, she has portrayed women who are strong, broken, and completely unforgettable. We are talking about everyone from the deeply disturbing Annie Wilkes in Misery to powerful judges, devoted mothers, and hardened survivors. Her face is practically a synonym for character. But in real life, the most challenging role she ever faced wasn't written by some Hollywood screenwriter. It was the role of a woman forced to stare down death itself in multiple terrifying acts. Back in 2003, a sudden diagnosis of ovarian cancer put her entire life on pause. But she fought back and she beat it. But then in 2012, just when she finally thought the nightmare was over, another brutal blow struck her: breast cancer. This time, there was absolutely no room for half measures. The doctors strongly recommended a double mastectomy. Without a second of hesitation, Kathy gave up her breasts because she decided to choose life instead. However, the surgery wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of another ordeal called chronic lymphedema, a painful accumulation of fluid in the arms that causes swelling and immobility. From that moment on, Bates had to wear compression sleeves, endure weekly therapy sessions, and radically change her entire lifestyle. That meant eating without salt, avoiding the heat at all costs, and giving up any sense of losing control. She does all of this just to manage a disease that sadly has no cure. And as if fate wanted to keep testing her limits, in 2017, she was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. This is the same disease that killed her father. So Kathy, already burdened with surgeries and pain, looked in the mirror and declared war. She lost almost 40 kilograms through strict diet and exercise and dropped another 20 kilograms with medication. The effort was absolutely titanic, but today at 77 years old, she says she feels stronger now than when she was 30. Even though the lymphedema is still there, even though the diabetes never sleeps, and even though the cancer could come back, she knows the truth. And that is why she lives every single day with the ferocity of someone who has already died twice and came back just to finish the script. For more than 35 years, Kathy Bates has brought to life women who are resilient, damaged, and truly iconic. From the terrifying performance of Annie Wilkes in Misery to playing judges, moms, and survivors, she has done it all. Her face defines what character means, but honestly, the hardest role she ever had to play wasn't in any movie script. It was the role of a brave woman facing her own mortality in several painful stages. In 2003, an ovarian cancer diagnosis stopped her in her tracks, but she overcame it. Yet in 2012, another cruel hit came with breast cancer. This time, there was no room for hesitation. The medical team advised a double mastectomy. Without wavering, Kathy removed her breasts and chose to keep living.